I'm Yvonne Hamoud, registered social worker and owner of New Moon Counseling. But out of the office, I'm a mom, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. Join me each week as I sit with a special guest to discuss everyday things that impact our mental health. We'll be chatting about everything from mental health and relationships to media and current events, as well as personal experiences and reflections, all in the hopes of normalizing our humanness and helping you see that you're not alone. This is Outside the Therapy Room. Hi everyone, welcome to Outside the Therapy Room. I'm Yvonne and today I am joined by Sarah.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good.
It's so nice to have you back.
It's nice to be back.
Okay, we are talking about weather today. It is the fall. Things are getting chillier this week. Some people are very excited about the fall and cozy weather, sweaters. I actually was very excited that it was sweater weather. But there's a lot of joy that can come from the fall and also some anxiety as we get closer to the earlier evening or earlier sunset and into daylight savings time that's going to be happening in November, and then into the cold weather. There's been a lot, I think, even just within the team here where we've talked about weather and it impacting our mental health. How is that for you? How's this weather change?
So far, it's been good. I think because the summer is kind of extended a little bit into the fall. Mm-hmm. And even this week when it's been cooler, it's felt nice.
Like it's sunny.
Yeah, it's been sunny. I don't know. And I'm liking the fall vibes right now.
Yeah. I know we've talked, I think probably when I've come in and it's been rainy, I've been like, I have the biggest headache. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to see how the weather impacts us differently. Mm-hmm. And so when it's about to rain, or when the Weather Channel says it's going to be raining soon and it doesn't for like a few days, I have a killer headache that whole time. And it's just so interesting to see how this weather really impacts our mental health, because then I have a headache, so then I'm a little bit more irritable or short, or I don't have as much capacity because I'm like dealing with a headache. Like all of those things can happen. Mm-hmm. Is that something that happens with you with the rain?
Usually with the rain, especially if we have several days in a row of rain, I just start to feel really like blah. Yeah. Like tired, not motivated, like almost grumpy, I guess not as happy as I would feel if it were sunny out.
Yeah. It's really interesting, again, like how different weathers impacts us all differently, because I did ask social media and people did mention that I think it was like split. It was maybe like 50-50 or close to it, where I asked, how do you feel when it's rainy and like cold? And a lot of people said that they like the rain. And the other were like, no, we don't like the rain. We feel exactly how you mentioned.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting. Like some people really like the rain. It feels cozy. They like hearing the sound of rain. It can be soothing for them. And then there's me and you who are like, ugh, the rain, this is miserable. And we don't feel, we're more agitated or more upset.
I think for me too, when it rains, I can't go outside. And I love going outside. I love going for walks or hikes.
Yeah, you're our walker.
Yes, I'm the walker. So when I can't do that, it also makes me feel like upset or uncomfortable, because
you're losing.
Yeah,
you're losing something that helps you, something that's part of your coping or like mental health.
My mental health.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't like being like cooped up in the house. So.
Yeah. If we're going with seasons, then if we were to start there, like right now we're kind of talking about the rainy springtime season, maybe, where it's raining a little bit more. And so some people feel very happy about the rain, and some like us, we're feeling headaches, irritable, all of that. But after the rain in the spring, where it can be a little bit warmer, I can enjoy that weather sometimes.
Yeah, me too.
And other times I enjoy the weather, but I don't like the view. Right? Like the snow is melting. It's all brown and muddy and gross. The flowers haven't come out yet. And so on a day where it isn't particularly sunny, it can kind of be like a mood drainer of like, oh, it doesn't really look that pretty outside.
I agree with that. But I think in the springtime, especially after coming through the winter, which I mostly dislike, it just feels like, I feel so hopeful.
Yeah.
And I feel so excited, like when the weather starts to, like when the temperature increases and the weather starts to get better, I'm like, oh, we're almost at the summertime, or we're almost at nice weather.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, oh, it's okay if it's raining, or it's okay if, it looks dumpy outside, because I know that warmer, nicer weather is just around the corner.
It's like the anticipation
yes.
of the warm weather. Mm-hmm. Is there any, I guess because of the anticipation in the spring of it getting warmer and having nicer weather, I see just even around my house, we have a lot of runners and we have a lot of people that bike. All of a sudden we just see that everybody's out. Yeah. Everyone's out in t-shirts and shorts. And I'm like, it's only 5 degrees. Yeah. I'm still in a jacket.
I know. The other day, so I guess it was last night, we walked the dogs and I wore my winter jacket.
Yeah.
Because it was cold. I don't know what temperature it was.
It was 18 degrees. Oh, was it 2?
No, last night. Yeah.
Oh,
it was
at night.
2. Yes.
Okay.
And
that's
I'm
cold.
like, I'm freezing. And I said to my husband, if this was April, I would be excited that it's 2 degrees.
Yeah.
But it's
anything above 0, it's good.
Yeah. But now I'm like, no, I'm wearing my winter coat.
It is actually really funny because I was mentioning that to my husband too, because it was, I think, 16 degrees during the day. And I'm like, the kids need to put on pants and a sweater because it's going to be cold. So at least they can run around without their jacket. And then he made a comment isn't it so funny that in the spring, if it was 16 degrees, they would be in shorts and maybe a sweater or long sleeves or pants and a t-shirt. So it's so funny, the time of either because we're going from freezing cold and things getting a little bit warmer, our bodies are like, yay, heat. Yeah. Whereas we're going from heat to cold now and our bodies can't adjust.
Yeah.
And it's
awful.
It's awful, but it's also kind of interesting.
Yes, very interesting. Yeah.
So now moving into summer, we were just talking about this before we were recording, but I love the heat.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
It's like a warm blanket. I think I mentioned sometimes I sit in my car without the air conditioning until I can't bear it anymore. Yes. Yeah. But it just feels so cozy and warm. And I just love the temperature of it, but also the opportunity to do things, right? Go to the beach, see friends, patio weather. We want to be outside. And you being a walker, I'm assuming that's also an exciting thing.
Yes.
And when you were here during the summer at work, during your break, we would always not see you in the office. You'd always be out walking around. So the heat kind of allows us to be able to access different activities that we can't do during the winter and the spring.
Absolutely. It's great. I love it.
What do you love about summer and the heat?
I don't know. It feels comfortable. I find the cold very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just love being able to be outside and being able to go to the beach or go for hikes, go paddle boarding. I just feel like there's so much more to do outside in the summertime than the winter.
Yeah. And again, that's one view of the weather.
Yes.
And for some people feel maybe that some of the symptoms that can come from, or I guess how you feel in the summer. You're sweaty. Sometimes it's hard to breathe. It's just unbearably hot that you would prefer to stay inside. Some people have mentioned that kind of temperature can kind of make the anxiety symptoms a little bit more heightened. And so then it ends up triggering them to feel more anxiety because of the heat. Mm-hmm. And we were just reading an article that also mentioned that with heat, there can also be a lot of aggression and violence that can happen because of that discomfort with it being so hot. Mm-hmm. And on the opposite end of how we feel in the winter where we're kind of cooped up at home, for people who do feel a lot of sensitivity to the heat, it can kind of feel like that, right? It's so hot and unbearable. We can't even sit outside and enjoy an iced tea or the heat because it's just so hot. There's no wind. It just feels really uncomfortable. And so they're having to stay inside. And so maybe those activities that we all look forward to doing in the summer are maybe not as accessible for people who have that sensitivity.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. And again, with this article we were reading, I think there was a study that was done where they noticed that there was a lot more aggression that happened during holidays and stuff when the temperature was a lot warmer. So shootings and accidents and acts of violence that happen more because of that agitation with the weather.
Yeah, it makes sense though. I mean, if you're already feeling heightened, right, or emotionally dysregulated, then you're more likely to act aggressively or impulsively. It makes sense.
I'm trying to remember back to the summer. There was a couple of days where like the heat was
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
like it was just like too hot and there was barely any wind. And I remember we also had to like bring the kids in because there was like severe heat warning. And those moments, like they're telling you, you know, don't spend too much time outside, make sure that you're staying hydrated. And for some folks who are on SSRIs, there's some medication where it's not helpful to be out in the sun. Like it could have a negative side effect. And so with the summer, there's a lot of these different joys and excitements, but there's also like, there's like a nice sweet spot, like a 22 to 28 degree with like a nice warm breeze. Like that is the perfect weather for me. But then when it becomes more, depending on where I am, it might not be as comfortable.
I think like 40 is too much for me.
40 is a lot.
But
like 30 is nice if you're like at the beach or at the cottage and there's like a pool of water like close to you where you can cool off.
Yeah. But even I remember on those like super hot days, I would go out into the backyard. I'd be in the shade and like reading a book with like a cool glass of water or something, iced coffee maybe.
Yeah.
And I was okay.
Me too.
But I know that not everybody's like that or has the ability to go into their backyard and sit in the shade.
I think it also depends on like where you live, what your environment is. Like all of those things also play a factor.
If you have central air conditioning,
yeah. Like if I didn't have air conditioning at night, like I think Alex talked about this in the sleep episode. Like when she gets too hot, she wakes up and it's difficult for her to fall back asleep. And I would say like I'm uncomfortable. Then I'm like, you know, like, ew, I feel like I'm stuck in my sheets. Like, this doesn't feel good and it can impact my sleep. But yeah, like for the people who maybe don't have that central air, like it's going to be a little bit more uncomfortable. And then it does impact their mental health differently because they're having to deal with that discomfort in the home and not really being able to escape it.
Absolutely. I remember when I was like younger, we didn't have central air, and then my dad worked in a factory.
Oh.
So he was in like the heat all day and he never had any relief. And I don't think it actually impacted his mental health, but I couldn't imagine doing that.
Yeah.
I feel very like privileged to work in an air conditioned office all day and then come home to an air conditioned house.
Yeah.
That's why I also sit in my car with no air conditioning on, because I like the heat.
It is nice.
Yeah.
But no, I think I'm remembering back too. I think when I was younger, we also didn't have an air conditioning until much later, where we bought an air conditioning unit, probably because me and my brothers were complaining so much, my poor parents. But that's tough. And especially like working somewhere where maybe you already are experiencing certain levels of emotion at the job that you're in. And if there isn't any air conditioning there, the heat then does add to those emotions, right? And then everything just kind of like our tolerance isn't as high because our body's trying to regulate just physically, like try to cool down.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then moving into the fall, we were just talking about this too. Like the fall, we see it everywhere. Like, yay, fall weather. Like it's like everyone's favorite season.
Pumpkin spice.
Pumpkin spice, everything. And just like sweater weather, things are cozy. It looks so beautiful outside, honestly. The trees are so pretty. All of like the change in nature looks so nice. And like you get to wear cozier clothes, right? Like you get to wear like warm, cozy boots, you know, sweaters and layers and scarves and hats and all of this amazing accessories. And so a lot of people really enjoy the fall. It's maybe also those who had a hard time with the heat. It is really nice to kind of be able to warm up a little bit or to feel a little bit more of that crisp coolness in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then on the other end of that, we are noticing that the sun is setting earlier. And I think if it's okay for me to say, like you mentioned that when everyone's excited about the fall and about being in the season, sometimes it does bring up anxiety for you because it's getting closer to those longer darkness, right?
Yeah. The dark days, the colds. I remember, you know, I'm at work, it's 4:00 and it's dark outside.
Yeah.
So I'm getting to work basically in the dark. I'm leaving work in the dark. Yeah. And it's cold. And Yeah, I've always struggled with anxiety in the wintertime, and it usually starts in the fall as like my expectation of, the darkness and the cold come. Yeah, so I definitely think that I struggled with seasonal affective disorder for sure.
For those that don't know, what is seasonal affective disorder?
So it's basically a change in your mental health that's related to changes in the seasons. I imagine that it could be experienced with changes in any season. I think it's more prominent in the winter time because the lack of sun, the shorter days, and the cold. But it's not like, so for me, it showed up as anxiety, a lot of anxiety, and then, not really being able to do anything about my anxiety. So usually with my anxiety, I would go for walks or try to do some exercise, spend some time in nature. But when it's freezing outside, or the weather's really bad, that wasn't really an option for me.
Yeah. So seasonal affective disorder, it is a mood disorder. You feel the same symptoms at the same time, roughly around the same time each year.
Yep.
Obviously, like you said, during the darker, shorter days of the fall and the winter. And it usually resolves after a few months. So usually in the springtime, when we get excited of the anticipation of the summer, our mood shifts. And so seasonal affective disorder is still like temporary within those times where it's darker and cooler until the next year. And then you can continue obviously having those symptoms come up. With some of the symptoms and like some of the things you mentioned, we lose some of our mental health coping strategies. Going outside, even like seeing friends, driving becomes a lot more challenging in the winter with the snow and everything. And so like you lose touch in those things that really help, are like mood boosters or really help you just connect and feel more grounded to yourself. And so, all of those things can be challenging. And also because we're so exhausted, like you said, 4 o'clock, it's dark outside. Your body's naturally like, oh, it's dark. It's time to go to sleep. Or it's like, time to kind of get ready to go to sleep. We can feel like a decrease of energy at the end of the day, which can then impact the energy that we have when we are having to prepare healthy meals. So we're eating out more. We are in kind of hibernation mode. So we are going to comfort food or we're eating more. And so then there's the weight gain and then we like feel a certain way about that. And like, just there's so many different symptoms and different impacts that like our body has when it gets colder and when we're feeling a lot of the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah, definitely.
What are some other symptoms?
That I've experienced?
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing.
No, not at all. I would say anxiety, depression, like just feeling like a lower mood. I think I struggled too with wanting to accept the fact that I had seasonal affective disorder or that it is actually a thing. I don't know why I thought this, but that perhaps it was one of those like mood disorders that, quote unquote, don't really exist. So when I would start experiencing heightened anxiety and depression in the wintertime, I think it was not having a label for a while was difficult for me too. So anxiety, depression, and anxiety causes me to not sleep. So I wasn't sleeping as well, not eating as well, because anxiety for me doesn't make me as hungry. Which can lead to like more proneness to getting sick, which gives me more anxiety.
It's just all kind of
it does. It snowballs. It really does. So, and I struggled for like many years. So
if you don't mind me asking, like, why was it difficult for you to kind of accept that label of seasonal affective disorder?
I think because I didn't know that it was actually real. Because I think there's a lot of like, maybe not a lot, but in the medical community, I don't think that certain disorders are taken seriously sometimes, or they're not actually considered as disorders.
Right.
So even though I was experiencing heightened symptoms in the wintertime, I think that because I guess I didn't, acknowledge that SAD was actually legit, that it was, yeah, that's why I didn't accept it, or had a hard time accepting it, or hard time, I don't know, making it my own, I guess.
Yeah.
Or like saying like, oh, I actually do have sad. Like, I am sad.
Yeah, I don't think that's uncommon.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people that do feel those symptoms and could like feel connected to that diagnosis, a lot of people around them may not validate that for them, or may not accept it. So they'll be like, you know what, I also feel down in the winter, or this is a normal feeling for you to have. We all feel that. So it can sometimes be like diminished, or like pushed aside, or not taken seriously, like you said. And so then that can kind of add to those feelings, because it can feel quite isolated when you're feeling those symptoms so strongly and it's being kind of like pushed away.
Yeah. Or being like labeled like, oh, this is just depression and anxiety. But for me, like, I know what depression and anxiety feels like, because I have that generally.
Yeah.
And then when it's magnified in the wintertime, I'm like, okay, this is something different.
Yeah.
Because it is like, my mood is influenced by the weather. If it's cloudy, if it's raining, if it's cold and cloudy, I notice changes in my mood, like drastic changes in my mood.
Yeah.
And I think it's been helpful to be like, okay, like I have seasonal affective disorder. It's a mood disorder. And then, you know, so I want to focus on the things that I can do to lessen my symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I think that this is an important reminder for other people out there who are feeling those symptoms, and know, like, you obviously knew yourself best to be able to say, I have felt depression and anxiety before, and this is not it. Like, this feels more, it feels an increase of symptoms, and being able to kind of advocate for yourself in whatever way, whether it was like a formal diagnosis, or just feeling like that label really did help explain like your symptoms and what you were experiencing. Like, it's important for clients to, or not clients, anyone who's listening to this, to be able to trust themselves when they're feeling those symptoms. And if a label fits with you and that helps you understand, and it helps other people around you understand how you're feeling, then it's okay for you to associate with that.
Absolutely. I think too, for me, like, or the difficult part for me with SAD is that when, like, for me, being active outside in nature is really helpful for my mental health. But with seasonal affective disorder, if I'm having a bad day, or if my anxiety is high and it's the wintertime and it's cloudy out or it's raining, well, it's not going to make me feel better to go outside. It's going to make me feel even worse than I already felt.
Yeah. And people that don't know that will be like, well, Sarah, go for a walk, go outside, spend time in nature. Yeah. Which, valid, yes, for some people, obviously that's helpful. It's important for us to also get our vitamin D naturally. Yeah. But when that's actually going to increase your symptoms, it's not beneficial. No.
And I think too, when you mentioned that people were like, well, yeah, like, oh, I also feel unhappy in the wintertime. This is different than unhappy.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Like, this is, it's a change in your mood that is really dependent on the weather. And I think that's an important, like, clarification.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I associate with the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder. And apart from that, there are moments that I'm like, oh, this sucks. Yeah. Like, I hate that it's cold outside. I don't like feeling cold. It's manageable for me.
That's right.
Right. And for somebody that, like, I think this is what you mean. If I was to come to you and be like, well, Sarah, I feel that way too. And I explain to you my feelings, which I'm able to get a hold on a little bit more. It's going to feel so invalidating.
Yes.
Right.
It's not that. Yeah. It's not the same thing.
Exactly. Exactly. I can hate the winter and still not meet the symptoms or the intensity of emotion and symptoms than you or other people who experience SAD feel.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. So what are some things that are helpful for you? Instead, like, when someone tells you go for a walk and you're like, want to punch them in the face, like, what works for you?
Honestly, what has worked the best is medication. I've been on antidepressants, I think, for 2 years now, maybe 3 years, ever since I started my master's. Yay. And that has actually really helped with my anxiety and my low moods. So even though I really dislike the winter, I don't experience the same anxiety or low moods that I do, but not to the same severity. Other stuff that's helpful or that's been helpful is, I mean, I take vitamin D every day.
Yeah.
I have a light therapy box at home that I'll use in the mornings. Like,
What's a light therapy box for those people that don't know?
Yeah. So sorry. It's basically a light that is a specific strength, and so you sit in front of it. You don't stare at it, but you sit in front of it while you're doing something else for about 30 minutes in the morning. And the light goes into your eyes, and it is supposed to decrease your symptoms of SAD that are related to dark days. Yeah. So I did that. That was kind of helpful.
Yeah.
And the other thing was just forcing myself to go outside and finding beauty in the things that I didn't like.
I think the finding beauty is one of the things that I have suggested to clients who experience SAD, because it's really difficult to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're really miserable and how you're feeling and where the weather is at.
Yeah.
And it's taking over anything else, any even window of joy. And so when we are forcing ourselves to look around our environment, whether we're going for a walk or we're sitting inside of our house, trying to find some of that beauty, whether it be the icicles that are falling down from the roof, or the trees covered in snow a certain way, trying to find that a couple of positives or things that are beautiful in that season can be again a shift in mentality when it comes to weather. So instead of being it's miserable outside, and I can also acknowledge that it looks pretty, like that there was just fresh snowfall.
Yeah, absolutely. There have been times where Guelph Lake is my favorite place to hike, and I go there often. And something that I've learned is that to be present, if I'm walking, I pause.
Yeah.
And I look around, and, the sun, if it's behind the clouds or if it's snowing or whatever, when you actually stop to take in your surroundings, you can recognize the beauty that's there that you might not have seen if you don't pause to take it in. Yeah.
And it's those things that, you said, you're grounding. So as you're looking for these things that could bring you joy or be beautiful, you're practicing mindfulness and grounding yourself to be present in that moment.
That's right.
Another thing that helps with the grounding piece is when we're breathing in cold air, it's really uncomfortable when we're doing it for a long time. But if we're doing it as a tool to help us cope, or as a grounding exercise, it can be really helpful. For those that experience anxiety or panic attacks, the change in temperature is really beneficial. And so for some of those clients in the summer, I'd be open the freezer and take a couple deep breaths. Whereas in the winter, when we're doing that, we can naturally kind of feel that sensation of inhaling that cold. And we feel it kind of going into our lungs. And when we breathe it out, it's a really cool opportunity to see our breath, right? Where we don't normally get that when we're inside or when we're in warmer temperatures. So even that is just an act of grounding, because you're breathing and you're also using your sense of sight to see your air or your breath kind of come out.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So along with everything else you said, yes, antidepressants can be very beneficial. And there's, connecting with other people, kind of sometimes are complete basic need. If we look at the Maslow's hierarchy of need, the very bottom tier is our basic needs. So that means sleep, food, hydration, roof over our heads, all of those things. Sometimes that can be the first thing to go when we are just trying to take care of ourselves, right? We might not eat well. We might not be moving our body as often. We might not be sleeping well. And so it's trying to help ourselves meet those basic needs. So as you mentioned, bundle up and go out for a walk, even if it's a quick one, or move your body inside in some way, right? Do gentle stretching or a couple jumping jacks or a workout routine, yoga, whatever thing you like to do to move your body can be helpful for you to do at home. And then also making sure that you're eating well, that you're staying hydrated, and that you're connected to other people.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Again, be really helpful.
don't love driving in the winter, but trying to connect in other ways.
Even a phone call is great, like with a close friend. Yeah.
And then like, again, there's obviously other coping strategies that we may not mention that are beneficial for you. So doing things that, bring you joy. The holidays sometimes can be something is like as a distraction that can bring us a lot of joy. Naturally, we're connecting with other people. And then usually like around January when we lose that, there's like, I think there's a name for it, right? Like
the January blues. No, that's a February blues.
January blues.
Something like that.
Something like that. But it can, like, there's a lot of stress that happens because now there's nothing to look forward to with the winter.
Yeah.
And we're now having financial stress from the holidays.
Yeah, from the holidays. It's a huge letdown. We stop
connecting people. Yeah, like huge letdown. And then we stop connecting with people. It's just such like a down after like a moment that was so heightened and exciting.
Yeah.
So yeah, as we're going into the winter, as we're going into the darker days, what are some things you want our listeners to know or to kind of think of if they do struggle with this change of temperature? And
I think it would be really helpful for folks to reflect on what brings them joy just in daily life, what brings them joy, and try to focus on incorporating those things into their lives, when it is good for them to do that.
Yeah.
We talked about some practical tools that they can use that could be effective for them. But I think I just would always remind myself, like, this isn't going to last forever.
Yeah.
There's only like 3 months of really crappy weather, really crappy winter. And then the spring's here. Once we get to March, you're fine. Yeah.
Kind of having that countdown, like knowing that it's not going to last forever can be really helpful and shift like your mindset on the weather. Yeah. Because yes, the days feel really, really long, but after a little while, when we 3 months will eventually feel like, oh my God, time went by so quickly. So just having that reminder. Yeah.
The other thing that I found helpful was to create a list of things that I have always wanted to do but never got around to, or places that I wanted to visit, because the winter can be beautiful. Yeah. And then making an effort to actually go do those things.
Yeah. For us, one of those activities with my kids is tobogganing.
Nice.
So we find a hill and that becomes a huge event and it's hilarious. And so for that day, we bear the, the cold weather and the snow, and we just, it's fun and it's, exciting for the kids, and I get to be a kid again because they'll push me down the hill. And so that can be enjoyable. A lot of people also really enjoy skiing or other winter sports. And so having that connection or association with winter can, again, not, solve everything or make you feel better all the time, but it gives you those moments where you're able to practice or go skiing or go skating or snowboarding, any other winter activity that I haven't mentioned, and just be able to have that enjoyment. Yeah. Even
something that I love, bird watching.
Yeah.
So, and it's so simple, but even going to different areas that have different birds or have birds that I don't have in my backyard. Yeah. It's simple. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but it gives you something to focus on or look forward to. And
a moment of joy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, there are some things for you to keep in mind as we get into this colder weather. Enjoy it. If this, like I was telling you, this weather currently that we're in the fall, it has been nice. I do like layers. I like my jean jacket and my little sweater and my boots. And so it has been really nice to kind of feel the breeze and the crispness in the air, but also have the sunshine there.
Yeah.
And so, if that is how you feel about the fall, enjoy the rest of the fall. And if you are, maybe feeling a little bit more anxious about the upcoming winter, this might be a good time to just brainstorm some things that you can do so that you're prepared for when those emotions do get heightened with this colder weather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here again.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for sharing your experience. And we will see you all next time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Outside the Therapy Room. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you reside in Ontario and are interested in working with one of our therapists, please visit our website in the show notes. If you reside outside of Ontario, a quick Google search or search through Psychology Today will help you find a therapist near you.